Hey, Mr. Thoreau, Mr. Bantham.
Hey, Mr. Kant.
Did you guys read that RHS student handbook that we all got?
Yeah, I read it, and I think that the guidelines that it presents all make sense, but they could be more clear. We should look at the Code of Conduct, for example.
The Student Code of Conduct explains that it exists to promote a healthy, positive learning climate. So do you think that the code is successful in accomplishing this goal, and is it moral?
I don't know. The rules and violations that it lists are clearly stated in terms of what students can and cannot do. But the limits of them are not clearly stated. Even for level 1 violations, the Code of Conduct only describes the punishment at their basic level, citing detentions or contacting parents. Do you think that this listing could lead to teachers or school officials giving unnecessary punishment to students? And do you guys also think that the vagueness of the handbook allows for immorality towards students?
Yeah, some things are pretty unclear. For example, what if a teacher tries to stop bad behavior with a verbal reprimand and publicly shames a student in front of all of their peers? Let's suppose a student is critiquing the behavior of the teacher, possibly insulting them. Under the Code of Conduct, the student is failing to act in a respectful manner. Is it justifiable to make an extreme effort to shame the student if doing so upholds the code and prevents further disruption?
Well, in this scenario, teachers act like a government over the students, who in turn act as citizens of a community. And citizens and students in this case, I believe to be higher and independent powers, and they should have the right to resist an authority that they deem to be acting tyrannical, and should even be encouraged to defy what contradicts their sense of morality. So, the students' actions were definitely commendable, as they pointed out the faults of authority instead of passively accepting injustice as a citizen should do, and therefore the student does not deserve an extreme punishment.
Man, I don't really know. I wouldn't say that the actions of the student were necessarily commendable, but they were a definite exercise in free will, which in itself can be used as a justification of his or her actions.
Thoreau, I disagree with you, because the teacher would be justified. She would be yelling at the student for the welfare and benefit of the students. As a result of the reprimand, the class would be more obedient and therefore managed better, making the teacher's action moral in this scenario compared to the actions of the kid being justified for talking back to the teacher.
Yeah, well, I find this sentiment very disturbing, because the rights of the citizen or student to critique authority and pass judgment, to attack what they determine to be unjust, should never be sacrificed for general stability. And as I've said before, the individual must come before the whole.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to have to agree with you on that one. In this scenario, the teacher is definitely attempting to better the classroom, but her use of the child to do so is immoral nonetheless. Her kind of exploitation of a student that is only committing a minor offense shows how her intentions can still be unethical, even if the class somewhat benefits from it. The system that the school created in the form of the Code of Conduct that we've described may allow this form of punishment for desired consequences, but the means by which the code achieves these ends are unethical, and everything else listed can still be up for interpretation.
Alright, fine. But anyways, what if the students violate the Code of Conduct in pursuit of a positive consequence? Would they be justified, or do any of you think they should be punished? Oh hey, Mill, I didn't see you there. Come on over.
Okay, I'll just sit right here then.
Welcome to the conversation, Mill. In the Code of Conduct, the school lists, quote, possession and or use of a weapon, which includes, but is not limited to, any knife, cutting instrument, cutting tool, firearm, shotgun, rifle, and any other tool, instrument, or implement capable of inflicting serious bodily injury, end quote, as a level 4 violation, which is the most offensive violation listed. It is made clear that student possession of weapons is not permitted. But what if the use of the weapon results in positive consequences for the school as a whole? For example, would a student be morally justified if he were to use a weapon to stop an intruder, such as a shooter in the school?
Kant, I believe that the student would benefit the school because he brought the weapon in. Although he did so illegally, he still increased the well-being of the students. Actions are right as long as they produce happiness, but wrong if they promote the opposite of happiness. and this action is justified as happiness is increased. Mill, do you have anything to add?
Well, I definitely agree. The consequences of the action are definitely what determines morality, no matter the means. And if something is done to increase collective happiness, I would say do it. In this case, the actions of the child in killing another to save many lives increases happiness, as the happiness of children saved by this action and their families outweighs any lost potential happiness from the target.
That is very true, but no matter the effect of the student's actions, the morality of his actions are still affected by motive and prior actions. How did the student obtain the weapon, and for what reasons did he have the weapon prior to the incident? If these factors in themselves are immoral, then the student should face repercussions, in my opinion. If he had brought and used the weapon for the sake of reputation rather than safety, for example, this would not be an ethical action. With the wrong intent, violations are of a higher importance.
Cons, I disagree. Either way, the school would benefit more, regardless of whether or not the student broke the rules of the code of conduct.
Yes, not following the rules and regulations of the school in this manner would be an exercise in free will, and like you said, the repercussions would be very positive. But at least for me, the intentions of the student must be positive, even if the action is, especially in this scenario, since we're discussing a much larger offense.
Alright, what about a less extreme scenario? What if the school is low on funds for many artistic and musical activities, so the students decide to skip class to protest? Is the action justified even if it means violating the code of conduct? I believe that the students were justified because they were trying to promote the general welfare of the entire school, even though they violated the code of conduct.
Yeah, I definitely agree. True, there'll be a disruption that will take some pleasure away from the teachers, but this will be outweighed by the great pleasure the students are going to have by having their clubs restored. The action will definitely be positive, and the consequences will be. So therefore, this action is a just one. Now, if the quality of the pleasure was more degrading, however, this would be cause to refrain from protesting and violating the code of conduct. The quality of the pleasure is definitely relevant, and if the pleasure is not intellectually stimulating, it's not worth pursuing. Pursuing more hedonistic pleasures would bring us closer to animals and sacrifice our humanity in our quest to satiate these desires. But fortunately, in this scenario, the pleasure does not fall into the category of being base or appealing to these basic sensory desires, so therefore the students are justified in protesting and violating the code of conduct.
I understand where you're coming from, but I disagree, as it's still pleasure. Pleasure can only be compared based on its duration and intensity.
Guys, my previous viewpoints still stand in this scenario. If the students are genuinely attempting to change the school to make a better environment for students, especially if they are willing to do this outside of the school's policies, they are acting autonomously with good intent and should not be punished. If, however, their positive actions have an unethical motive, the students should face consequences. Although I don't agree with your statement on the scenario, I would agree with your thoughts on lesser pleasures, Mill. This would not deserve any praise, and therefore the students would not be acting ethically.
Alright, so we do disagree on most of the morals of the principles and systems of the code of conduct, but we can all agree that most of it can be left up to interpretation.
Very true.